Good morning, New Life Church. How's everybody doing? Man, lively crowd, first service. I love it. I do have to say, I was able to speak this message in Russellville, and it's going to be a little different when I speak it here, because when I spoke it in Russellville, Pastor Mark, he's still not fully back yet from everything that happened at Easter. He's doing great. He's coming to the church a couple of days a week, and he's yelling at us, screaming at us. He's doing all that stuff. But he was gone when I spoke this message, and Caleb was gone when I spoke this message, and our other pastors, the Johnsons, were gone. So I made a joke with the crowd, the people that were there. I was like, hey, it's like I'm the kid that is finally old enough to not need a babysitter. This time it's different. The Snows are here. So it's like I am the kid that's trying to prove myself that I don't need the baby. No, I'm kidding. But can we give it up for the Snows, Jordan and Leah, your pastors? Man, it is always an honor to come up here and speak and be around them, just because Sav and I have known them for a while, and they got to see us step into this middle school role, and we were all four just kind of looking at each other like, whoa, what is this, middle school kids? But they were so great to us, and they gave us so much wisdom and so much advice, and they just really believed in us, and that's what we needed. Coming the season that we were stepping out of and stepping into, we really needed you guys. So thank you so much. I always love being here. You guys are amazing. It's been a while since I have been here. I don't know if Jordan said I had long hair. I don't remember if I had long hair or short hair. But I do know that I had a brand new baby whenever I was here last. So I'm going to show you a picture of this baby. Here she is. This is little Ellie. Her name's Eleanor, but we call her Ellie. She's named after my grandma. But she just turned 1 year old. First trip around the sun. Oh my gosh. It has been a crazy year. It's been fun. There's been a lot of tears, good tears, bad tears. No blood yet, thankfully, from her. I've bled a few times, but oh man, it's just being a parent is so awesome. It's been so much fun. Sav and I have enjoyed it. We've learned so much about each other, about the Lord. But I do know that it is always an honor and a privilege to open a series and close a series, and I'm very excited that I have the opportunity to close out this series in Philippians. It's been a fantastic series. We've covered a ton of amazing stuff. Philippians is one of my favorite books, and we're going to be closing this out with one of the most famous portions of Scripture in the entire Bible. And we're going to get to that later on, but we're going to read the whole thing starting off chapter 4, verses 10 through 13. It says, "How I praise the Lord that you're concerned about me again. I know you've always been concerned for me, but you didn't have the chance to help me. Not that I was ever in need, for I've learned to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach, praise the Lord, or empty, with plenty or with little." And here it is. This is the one. "For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." Paul is ending the book of Philippians by thanking the church at Philippi for sending him a gift. This is what this is about. Remember, he's in prison when he's writing this. And he's not like in the prisons that we have today. He's in a hole in the ground and probably sewage and all kinds of other things flowing at his feet or being dumped in on him. And he's talking about gratitude and contentment. Think about that for a second. This guy's in jail, and he is thanking this group of people for a gift and talking about he is content and grateful for the life that he has. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is contentment. And one of the biggest traps we're vulnerable to is discontentment. And if you were going to define the word discontent, it is a lack of satisfaction with one's possessions or status or situation. Put Paul into that perspective for a second. In life, there are so many temptations to want more and to want better and to want newer and nicer or even just want different things. And this temptation applies to every single one of us, from the youngest person in the room to the oldest person in the room, to the NLC middle students to the empty nesters. Discontentment applies to every stage and season of life. You could be discontent with the clothes that you have, or you could be discontent with your retirement account. It applies to every single person that's in here. And I would go out on a limb and say that discontentment is a major influence to many of the issues in our lives. Issues within ourselves, issues within our marriages, issues within our jobs. A lot of the things that we're discontent with, man, it's such a powerful word from Paul. So we're not gonna waste any time. We're gonna jump into this, but we got to remember that Paul is encouraging us and challenging us to choose contentment. Like you've probably heard Jordan and other people say that you have to choose joy. Paul is telling us that we have to choose contentment, just like we choose joy, just like we choose forgiveness, just like we choose all these other things. Paul is saying being content in life applies the same way. We have to choose it each and every day. But Seth, what does choosing contentment look like? How do I wake up? How do I wake up and be content in my life? I'm glad you asked. We're going to look at three things. Number one, the first way that we can be content or live a content life or fight discontentment, however you want to word it, is to renew our concern for others. Renew our concern for others. And Paul tells us this in verse 10, chapter 4, verse 10. How I praise the Lord that you are concerned about me again. Everybody say again. Concerned about me again. I know you have always been concerned about me, but you didn't have the chance to help. So this church, the people of this church at Philippi, they sent Paul a gift. They knew he was in prison. They saw that he had a need. They met the need. They were concerned for him. They were like, oh, the guy that helped us plant in our church, he's in prison. You know, some of you that follow golf, Scotty went to prison. You know, he got arrested. He was trying to pull into the golf course, and they're like, hey, take your knee to jail, bub. And if you love golf and you follow the PGA, you were concerned for Scotty Scheffler. You didn't know if he was going to make his tee time. You were concerned if he was going to shoot 3 under, if he was going to have a shot at winning. You were concerned because he went to jail. He partially ran over a police officer, but we're not going to get into what happened. But the church in Philippi was the same kind of thing was going on. Like the guy that helped them plant their church was in prison. So like, oh, we're going to send him a care package. And they did. But Paul says that they were concerned about him again. And the NIV, I'm an NLT guy, but the NIV says that they renewed their concern for him. And this word renewed can be defined as to revive, to flourish again, to grow green again. I think I've talked about it that I have a lot of plants in my house. So I've had to renew some plants because they're not always flourishing in our house. And this word lets us know that our concern for others has a tendency to fade. And it's something that we have to constantly keep at the forefront of our minds and strive for, to constantly be concerned for others. Because let's be honest, we all get busy, right? Like we all get busy. If you have kids, if you have grandkids, you know, if you have a job where you're working 12-hour shifts or whatever it may be, we all get busy. And when we get busy, there's just this natural thing that happens on the inside of us where we're not as concerned about others. And Paul is telling us, you have got to push past this busyness because we're all busy, and you have got to strive to continue to be concerned for others. And Paul's a great example of this. All of the epistles, the Pauline epistles that he wrote are him being concerned, bless you, for churches and people. Think about it. Corinthians, Philippians, Ephesians, Colossians, all of these different letters that we read about, he was concerned for these churches. He was like, hey, you got some stuff going on. Let me help. Let me give you wisdom. Let me give you insight. Let me tell you what I've seen and experienced and struggled through, and I'll write you this letter to help you. Timothy, he was concerned. A young guy that was going to leave and start preaching the gospel and doing all these things. And he was like, hey, it's kind of tough. It's kind of tough out there. So let me write you this letter and help you out. Paul is such a great example of being concerned for other people. He was constantly praying and encouraging and helping and fathering others around him. And it's amazing how he connects contentment with the concern of others. Because before this, I never really connected the two things. Contentment by being concerned with other people. But it makes so much sense because part of learning to be content is knowing that life isn't all about us. And that's tough. Like, I'm a youth pastor. I'm going to tell you guys the truth straight up. Like, that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes. Realizing that this life isn't all about me. This picture that I put up on the screen of that little girl, that took a while to adjust to. Like, I'm going to be honest. Becoming a parent and realizing that I don't have the freedom to just leave and go fish and go do all the things with my buddies or play video games until 3 a.m, like that was gone. And that took a while to get used to. I brought this human into this world, and now my life is not all about me anymore. And Paul's saying that's how life as a Christian is too. When we focus on others and their needs, we take the focus off of ourselves, and it helps us be content. And Paul says something similar that you probably already heard earlier in this series in chapter 2, verse 4. He says, don't look out only for your own interests. He said, but take an interest in others too. Jordan mentioned it. I just mentioned it. I'm the student pastor at Russellville, so I have this list of guys on a note card in my office. Some high school guys, some college guys, and I've started a new note card of like married guys with kids. But on these note cards are guys that I feel like I have a really good relationship with, and I'm honest with them, and they're honest with me. And every now and again, I'll just take a morning, and I will text each and every one of these guys individually, and I'll ask them questions about school, and I'll ask them questions about work, and I'll ask them questions about their family. If they're in a relationship, I'll ask them about that, how their battle with their sin and temptations going. I ask them all these kinds of things. And on those days where I spend a few hours in the morning just talking back and forth with these guys, I am so content. Like, I can just sit in my office and I just have this overwhelming feeling of being content. Because as I'm having these conversations with these high school and college guys, and I've added the guys that are in similar seasons of life as me, the Lord reminds me that I'm not the only one that's busy. I'm not the only one that forgets. I'm not the only one that struggles. I'm not the only one that worries. Like, I'm not the only one that feels all of these different feelings that I feel throughout a week or a month or a year, whatever it may be. And then once the conversations are over and they've kind of died down, the Lord always reminds me of how far He's brought me from when I was in high school and college. And thank God He has brought me from where I was to where I am. And that's where that's just the cherry on top of the contentment for that day. When He says, Seth, you used to be just like this guy. And now you get to pour into him. You get to invest in him. You're concerned for him because he reminds you so much of you. But He does, man. Whenever I have these conversations, I just am so overwhelmed with the life that I have. And I'm so thankful for the life that God has given me, and I'm so content. But we should all be asking these questions more. I should text these guys more often than I do. And I should add more people to these note cards more than I do. And you can just write these little questions down on the side. They're not going to be on the screen, but simple questions. How can I pray for you? How are you doing? That is the one text that I send to all those guys. Just very straightforward. How are you? Not, hey, how's it going? That leads to like a little casual. Like if you really want to have a real conversation with somebody, hit them with a how are you? And that'll let them know that you're serious. What can I do to help? Questions like that are questions that renew our concern for other people, because those questions prompt a genuine response. The more time we spend listening to others and lifting them up with prayer and encouragement, it will renew our concern for them, but it will also just renew our concern for others in general. And it will allow us to live a more content life. Now I have a more specific thing that I need you to answer. Who is someone that you need to renew your concern for? I'm sure the Lord could very easily put someone in your head right now or on your heart as soon as I ask that. Who is someone you need to renew your concern for? Who is someone who's going through something so hard and you know it? Reach out to them. Send them a text. Ask if you can help. Who is someone who God keeps bringing to your heart and your mind over and over and over? Maybe God is trying to tell you, hey, renew your concern for this person. Reach out for this person. Don't even reach out to them. Just start praying for them. Who is someone that you used to check in on, but you haven't checked in with them in a while? Call them, FaceTime them, text them, reach out to them, pray for them, take them to lunch. Do whatever you do to renew your concern for that person. And also, this is why we serve at the church on a weekly basis. All the different ministries that happen to make New Life Church what it is a spiritual alarm clock for our souls that forces us to be intentional about prioritizing others. It's what it does. Hospitality. We're putting other people's concern, other people's needs above our own. We get here early to make sure the coffee's done, to make sure the water's hot. The greeters are here early, the worship team, all of these different areas, little life, kid life, for everything. That's an alarm clock. And if you serve in those areas, you know what I'm talking about. Like when you go in and you're in that little life room and you're loving on those kids, like you just have this overwhelming feeling of joy and contentment because you're not worried about yourself. You're worried about loving on those kids and teaching them the Word of God. If you're a greeter, that's where I started serving when I came to New Life Church. I was a greeter, and I loved it. And for the 2 services, we had 3 sometimes. For 3 services, that's 3 hours out of my day. I didn't think about myself at all. My sole goal was to make people smile. That was my goal as a greeter. Sometimes I didn't say hello, sorry, but my goal was just to make you smile. And I'll give you a compliment. I'll say, hey, I like your shoes, Jordan. Jordan always has nice shoes. Or I would say, I like your shirt. I like your hair. How about those hugs? Didn't say that very much. But whatever I could say to make somebody feel welcome, to make them smile, that was my sole goal. And that's what serving does for all of us in the church. So I would encourage all of you, serve in some capacity. And it will help you renew your concern for other people. And when we serve, God does this weird thing where He turns like frustration into compassion. And we also need that. And He turns stress into joy. And all these different things happen inside us. So I would encourage you, take some time, volunteer in some capacity, and see what the Lord does in your heart. Not other people, but see what the Lord does in your heart. Number 2, moving right along. Number 2, we got to pursue the secret. Pursue the secret. And we're going to read this in verse 11 and 12. Paul is so funny. Like, I wish and I hope and pray that I could have the attitude of Paul. He starts, not that I was ever in need. I would love to go back and see what all has happened to him up till this point. Like, how many times were you beaten with rods? How many times have you been stoned? How many times had you been in jail before you're currently in jail talking about this? How many times have you fled a city running for your life? Like, a lot of really bad things happened to Paul. Have you been bit by a snake yet at this point? My man was trying to start a fire, reached down to light the fire, and a snake came out and bit him on the hand. Like, what is going on? And then he says, not that I was ever in need. Yes, you were. Like, if this is 2024, you would be in serious need. But I hope I can live a life like that someday. Not that I was ever in need, for I've learned to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or with little. No one is born content, right? Like when Ellie was born, automatically mad. Like she was comfortable, it was warm, she was being fed a lot and often by my amazing wife. And then the doctor just reached in and plucked her out. And she was very upset. So like her first few seconds of being alive outside of her mother were not content at all. And from that point on, it's just not a natural state. And if you have kids, if you have grandkids, if you have younger siblings, like we all know that being content is not something that we naturally lean towards. Like we don't lean towards satisfaction. Like we lean towards discontent. Like Ellie was upset automatically. And we know that as they get older, as kids get older, it doesn't take a lot. I'm going to say a phrase here, but you may know it in your mind as something else. But we know as kids get older, it doesn't take a lot for them to lose their contentment. You know, sometimes we say that they lose their mind. But in this scenario, it doesn't take a lot. Like when the little cup that she sticks her hand down in, when it runs out of puffs, she's out of contentment. Just like that. And then you have to like pull a magic Mr. Fantastic and stretch back there and just sprinkle puffs on her head and just hope that she gets a few. But it's that simple though. Like it's that simple when at least for Ellie. When there's no food, there's no contentment. And, you know, my wife, how old is my wife? 20-something, 26, you know, no food, no contentment. So I guess not a lot changes. But we're the same way. We're the same way. And it can be with the most minute thing in life. If there's no blank, there's no contentment. If the Hogs are playing on SEC Plus and we don't have it, there's no contentment. You know, if Mike Jones turns the air off on the way to Clarksville at 6:40 in the morning, no contentment in the back seat from Seth Walker. That happened today. I said, hey, why don't you turn that air back on? But I say all this to say contentment is something we must look for in life. It's not natural, so we have to seek it out. As a parent, we give kids what they need to be content. But as the parent, we have to seek it out. It's not something that we lean towards, so we must look for contentment in life. And Paul understood this. He experienced it all. You got to think, he had all the fame. He had all the money. I would assume that he lived in a mansion whenever he was a Pharisee. He had everything going on. He had it all. And then he stripped it all away to follow Jesus. So whenever he references he experienced having everything and having little and having a full stomach and having an empty stomach, he was talking about his previous life because he did have everything. Anywhere that he went, he had it all. He had the right to travel wherever he wanted, to eat the nicest food, to have the nicest clothes, to have the nicest sandals. Like he lived a life where he had it all. And he gave it up to follow Jesus. And he did have nothing except Jesus. And he said that he considered his old life garbage for the sake of Christ. That's what he's saying whenever he said being in need and having plenty, being hungry and being well fed, being celebrated and being stoned. He learned to be content no matter the circumstance. And then in verse 12, he said that he learned the secret. And when we talk about learning in any form, it can be described as a pursuit. Like whenever I was going to college, I was pursuing a piece of paper. Technically, I pursued two. But I was pursuing this degree. And I had to learn a lot to get it. And to learn the secret of contentment, we must pursue it. And I know I just mentioned college, but I got to talk about something that is more personal. Whenever I think of pursuit, I just automatically think of deer hunting. Like that's just where my mind goes. I think of it because as someone that spends a lot of time in the woods, when that one deer shows up, it's over. Anybody in the room hunt? Any deer hunters in here? Just me? You? Okay, thank you. So the two of us, no, none of you else listen to this. I'm just talking to him. I'm just kidding. Please listen. But when that deer, surely you know somebody that is obsessed with deer hunting, so this will resonate with you. When that deer shows up, every inch of brain space, spare brain space, gone. Just out the window. It's all we think about. We go out, we put out more cameras, we buy things that we don't tell our wife about, feed, minerals, stuff like that. And we study these pictures like neuroscience, or maybe your friend or whatever, they study the pictures of the deer. And we come up with the perfect plan, the perfect tree, the perfect camo. Everything's got to be perfect. And we're just constantly studying and learning and doing all these things to try to be in the woods the same time as this animal. And we're constantly putting ourselves in the right position at the right time. And it's the pursuit that keeps people coming back. It's the pursuit that keeps me going back to the woods. And honestly, it's the pursuit that kept me still going to class in college or whatever it may be that you're trying to learn. And think about this. What if we pursued the secret of contentment like some of us pursue deer or a college degree or a raise? Golly. It will always be easier to want more, to want something better, to want something different, to want something newer. But just because it's easy doesn't mean it's right. Instead of searching for something else, let's passionately seek God and ask Him to help us learn the secret of contentment for the life that we have right here and right now. Contentment isn't a destination that we arrive at. It's a secret that we find in life. In every season, contentment can be found if searched for. It's not about more of this or less of that or what's in the past or what may be in the future. It's about being faithful and thankful and teachable in what God is doing today. And number three, we got to depend on Jesus' strength. It's the verse we've all been waiting for. Philippians 4:13. For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. This is one of the most misquoted verses in the entire Bible. And I will be first to say that I misquoted this more than anybody else because my 10-year class reunion is coming up. And I went back whenever I was preparing for this message. I went back and I searched through my mom's Facebook pictures for hours. Because I had this one senior picture, everybody's senior pictures were like super cool. I had this really cool senior picture. It was so corny. Like, they're cool when you take it, but man, I was so lame. Such a cheese ball. But I had on like this super nice clothes, like a suit, like with a tie and stuff. And then I had my basketball shoes over my shoulder. And in huge black Sharpie on the side of my basketball shoes was Philippians 4:13. Like, He is not going to give me the strength to dunk a basketball. Like, what are you talking about, Seth? Philippians 4, he's talking about being content in life. Like Paul's writing this from jail, talking about being content in the season of life and your relationship with God, not basketball. Oh my gosh. I couldn't find the picture. I'm sorry. I couldn't find it. I wanted it so bad. But that verse is not saying that he will give us the strength to do whatever we want. And most of the time, that's how that verse is used in Instagram bios and on bracelets and on T-shirts and hats. This verse is portrayed as God will give you strength to do whatever. That's not necessarily true. Most of the time, he's going to give you strength to not do whatever. But what Paul is saying is that through Christ, the strength that he gives us, we're able to do his work. We're able to walk with Jesus in his ways. The strength that we get from Christ ultimately allows us as broken people to follow Jesus. That's what Paul is saying. Through every circumstance, through all the bad things that have happened to me, the strength that I have through Jesus is why I can write you this letter and talk about being content. Think about that for a minute. This is coming from a guy who was in prison between 60 and 62 AD. Like, he was not in prisons of today. He was not getting 3 meals and time in the yard and playing basketball. Like, he was being tortured because he was preaching the gospel. And he wrote one of the most famous verses of all time, saying, through your relationship with Jesus, talking to the church, through your relationship with Jesus, you can persevere and find contentment no matter what happens. We must learn that we can't have true contentment without God's strength. We must learn to depend on Jesus for strength and try to not do it all on our own. Because can y'all agree with me that whenever we push Jesus to the side and try to solve all of our problems on our own, it's exhausting. It is so exhausting. At least for me, like, it exhausts my relationships. I get short with my wife. In the future, I'll probably get short with my kid. I don't have the patience that I have with students. All these different things, whenever I try to do it with my strength on my time, it is so hard. And if you're struggling with contentment today, what would it look like for you to fully depend on Jesus for strength? To depend on someone means that you rely on them, that you trust them, and that you put your confidence in them. What's stopping you from depending on Jesus that way today? Thankfully, he's the most dependent person that's ever lived and walked on this planet. He's the only person that will never let you down. And over the past year, probably close to 2 years, I've had this opportunity to make a friend. And I cherish this relationship so much. And it's such an interesting relationship that I believe the Lord brought into my life. We got a letter in the mail at the church, and staff brought it into my office. And she's like, hey, this is just addressed to the church. Like, do you want to read it? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll read it. And if, it says Kevin or Caleb or Mark, I'll go put it on somebody else's desk. And I get this, I open it up, and it's a handwritten letter. And it says, to New Life Church. And then this guy proceeds to tell us that he's in jail and that he's had an encounter with Jesus, that God just met him in his cell one night, and that he's radically changed, and that he's looking for a Bible. And he reached out to New Life Church because he remembered one time somebody mentioned New Life Church. And after that moment, he got up, and that was the one memory that he had of church in general. So he wrote us a letter. And I was like, dude, absolutely, I'll send you a Bible. So I wrote him a letter back. I don't know how much it cost to send everything, but I packed a box full of stuff. Bibles, Bible studies, any spare stuff we had. I was searching through Pastor Mark's office, like, do you have 2 of these? Do you have 2 of these? And I sent this dude a bunch of stuff because he said, I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands. So I send him the stuff, and he writes me a letter back, and then we just like start writing letters back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And about halfway into it, he writes me a letter, and he's like, hey, Seth, I really need you to pray. And I was like, okay. And he said, I've got a huge hearing coming up, and it's going to determine a lot for me. And he's like, I just really need you to pray. It was a short letter, probably the shortest one he's ever written me. I've got a hearing coming up. Please pray. I wrote him back, yes, sir, praying. Shipped it off. Waited, and I get probably the longest letter I've ever gotten back. And he says, hey, it didn't go good. I'm going to be in prison for a couple more years. And I just sat the letter down, and I was so discouraged. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, this dude, he goes to jail because he was struggling with addiction, and he had all kinds of stuff going on, and then he gets his life right. And I was like, what in the world? I was like, if anybody deserves to get out early, it's him. So I'll pick it back up, and I flip it over, and I keep reading. And he said he's going to be in jail he's going to be in prison for a few more years. And he says, but I am so blessed and thankful because I believe God gave me this as an opportunity to get my GED and continue to share the gospel with everyone that's in my cell block. This guy's probably one of the most content people that I know. And he's in federal prison. He is a prime example of leaning on Jesus every day for his strength. That's what he does. He's told me that multiple times in letters. He said, Seth, I don't know if I would be here without Jesus. I don't know how people do this without Jesus. That's why I'm not sad about getting out, because I can tell all these guys about Jesus. And I'm just like, dude, I should be more like you. And I'm not in prison. And I have a nice house, and I have a car, and I get to eat whatever food I want to eat, and I have a family, and I have all this stuff. And for most of the time, he's probably more content with me, more content than me. I think we should all strive to be like my friend. Just each and every day, because we've got it better than him. We're not in prison. We're not looking at 3 to 5 more years, like all of our circumstances stacked up against his, we win. But if you stack contentment up with us, with me, I won't say you, me and him, it's probably not as close as it should be. Here are 3 specific areas that we can depend on Jesus for our strength. Number 1 is perspective. Perspective. Our lack of contentment often comes from a lack of perspective. We often focus on what we don't have instead of what we do have. And if that's the case, we need to ask Jesus to help us see things that we're overlooking and see things the way he sees them. And then we can thank him for all the things that he's blessed us with and the way that he takes care of us. Number 2 is our priorities. Number 2 is priorities. Lack of contentment can be the result of misplaced priorities. We might be pursuing the wrong things and have stopped being faithful with what's right in front of us. If that's the case, then we need to repent and ask Jesus to help us get our priorities back in line. And then number 3 is our source. Lack of contentment can be the result of doing things in our own strength. And all of you agreed with me that is exhausting. Jesus is the source of our strength. He empowers us so we can be content in all circumstances. He said it in John 15:5. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. If we want the fruit of contentment in our life, we have to remain in Jesus as the source of our strength. Through the good times, through the bad times, on vacation, whatever the season may be, that's the one thing that we've got to keep consistent. A constant temptation we will face in life will be to want more, to want something better, to want something different, or want something new. Mike and Macy and I were actually talking about wanting something new walking in here this morning. It was small, but we absolutely didn't need it. But it was just something that was a part of our natural conversation. We all three unanimously agreed that we would like to have this thing, but new. And me and Macy currently have it right now. It was a new pair of these. It can be easy to become discontent in life, but we fight discontentment by renewing our strength for others, pursuing the secret of contentment, and depending on Jesus for our strength. This contentment brings peace and joy and fulfillment that many of us in this room would agree that only comes from Jesus. And Paul had this despite all that he went through, and I believe God wants us to experience the same exact thing too. This contentment is something that the world looks for in all the wrong places. I love sports. I love all kinds of sports. I love hunting and fishing and a lot of things, but none of those things bring contentment like Jesus. And the world tells us, just get more of this and you'll be more content. Get more of this and you'll be happier. Get more of this and you'll have joy. That's not true. Joy only comes from the Lord. The world looks for contentment in all the wrong places. But my prayer today is that we would be a people that confidently says, I've learned the secret of being content in every situation. And then we proceed to tell the people in our life how. Through our relationship with Jesus, what He's done in our life. For me, what He's brought me through. All these different things, every different aspect and part of our testimony builds it up. So we're able to live this content life that only comes through Jesus. With heads bowed and eyes closed,